Prepare to be swept away to magical realms and epic love stories. Today, we're joined by the incredible Elizabeth Stevens to talk about the enchanting world of diverse sci-fi and fantasy romance. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mature content intended for adult audiences only. Elizabeth, I am fangirling so hard. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I have been, reading your books, I want to say since about 2021. I want to say end of 2021. I blew through the Population series and was like, oh my God, yes. I need more. Loved it so much. Loved the characters he created, this post-apocalyptic, dystopian type of world with a badass FMC owning her ability to be like, I don't need anybody else. I'm just going to do my thing. And then got into the Zaviri Mate series and actually did not read a lot of alien romances, but in the same sense, I feel like your approach is very different than a lot of other authors, in that a lot of other authors tend to do the crash landed or Mars needs women or the space inept type of stuff. Whereas yours is like thousands of years of humans being on another planet and then interacting with aliens. And so I feel like it created so much more backstory, probably gave you a lot more flexibility with your approach, which kind of leads me to, how did you get into writing and creating these really incredible stories?
Like, my writing origin story that I always say is pretty much attributed directly to my mom, because I really was into the American Girl dolls when I was a small child. And in order to get one, I had to read all of the books in the series, but there are, shocker, no Black American Girl dolls. So I wanted one that looked like me. And in order to get one, my mom said I had to write a story. And so I ended up writing, funny enough, like a sci-fi space odyssey, middle grade space odyssey, like on this old ancient hunk of junk computer that I still think I have somewhere. Never ended up finishing it, but I did get my American Girl doll. And so that was kind of the origin. But with the Very Mate series, just the different approach that I kind of had, that started from just sheer frustration with the crash landing trope or the abduction trope, because there's actually logically only one possible storyline there, which is, I've been abducted, how do I get back home? Or I crash landed here, how do I get back home? And I really can't tell you how it makes me like twitchy when you get to that end scene and they're like, actually, I've decided to stay. I'm like, no, we all knew already you were going to stay. So this was just a complete waste of my time. So I was like, how can I circumvent that as a storyline and actually have something more interesting? And I did read, like, I think two of kind of my major inspo books were Venomous by Penelope Fletcher, because that was one where it was an alien abduction, but there wasn't ever really a talk of going home. It was just, that's it. And then there was His to Claim by Taylor Vaughn, which is Theodore Taylor and Eve Vaughn, which I thought was really good. It was just very dark and grapey. So I was hoping to do something maybe on the lighter side of that.
Yes, I read Taylor Vaughn's after, like, more recently, like in the last month or two, and trying to explain to my husband what a breeding ceremony was. I'm sure I'm on a list somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, trying to explain this. And I was like, it's fine, it works out. But also, it's really intense. But I did not get that at all from yours. While it does have some elements of, wait a minute, we have this negotiation, and this is actually not aligned with the Supreme Ruler and what he wants to be happening on this planet. But you have fated mates in there, which I think you do this so beautifully. A lot of them, it's like, it doesn't matter, you're with this person, period. And that can be really frustrating. And even thinking about, I want to say it's your second book, where it's like, he does not want to be with her at all. He has so many prejudices against humans. And she's like, look, I'm just trying to do the best thing for my people. I'm trying to just make this work. She's religious. He is not. Like, there's just so many opposing things that even though they're fated mates, maybe it's book 3, because the second one is on the ice planet. 4. Oh my goodness. Okay. So yeah. And there's like all of them are together in my brain because they're all so wonderful. They're seriously, go read the whole thing. I think I blew through all of them within a couple months. But I feel like it's just such a beautiful way of approaching fated mates where it's not like, no, we're a slave to this thing inside of us that's telling us that we're supposed to be with this other person, even if we don't want to. So why was that important for you?
Like, a lot of my writing comes from like what I've seen and read and liked, but I think could be a little bit better. And so one of the things that I realized that Fated Mates does and doesn't do is that what it doesn't do is it doesn't create a believable love story, because it just is a trigger and then there's a sexual attraction. And after you've had sex with the same person enough times, like you can kind of probably like that anybody, like so there has to be something else there, which is why this is a very mate series. I do a one-sided fated mates. So for the Varaxians and like the alien species who are familiar with the concept, like theirs is usually instantly triggered, whereas the human females have to like come into their like fated mates thing. The Zana has to hit them at a certain point for it to be triggered, which I thought was fun because it's an easy way to create an enemies to lovers friction without having to try super duper hard. The other thing that Fated Mates does, however, is that unlike a believable love story, it lets you create, what did my friend call it the other day? My in real life friend was like, the book community needs to start adopting not like a spice meter, but like a spice frequency or something. I don't remember what she called it, but basically to say this isn't a slow burn. This is like a fast, slow, 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 fast, fast. Like it's like different like spice like patterns. And that's one thing that I really like to do in my books is create different spice patterns. So maybe one couple doesn't have sex until the very end, but then the other couples have explosive sex from on page 1, And so that's the thing that Fated Mates can do, is that you can use it for that at any point in the story, which I think is great because you can work on building a believable love story while at the same time not depriving your readers of what they want to read.
Here for the smut. I totally get it.
Gotta have both.
Yes. And now your Omegaverse series takes a slightly different approach. So could you talk through that as well for anyone who's like, wait, what's Omegaverse? What is it? And then how do you incorporate the Fated Mates differently in that series versus like the Severe Mate series?
It's funny when I describe Omegaverse because to me, Omegaverse represents a dystopian power hierarchy, not a sex thing. But like most people will associate it with like wolf pack dynamics where you have an alpha, a beta, and then like omega, or I don't know how wolves work. But in either case, it's kind of a sexual tool. So if you have omegas, then they go into heats, and alphas can go into ruts, and alphas and omegas pair, and lots of fun, spicy stuff happens. But I really like it for the way that I use it in my dark fantasy series, which is Dark City Omega and Shadowlands Omega. More books coming. The alphas sit at the very top. There's not that many of them. Betas make the dominant class, and then omegas are the fewest. And my omegas all have magic, and my alphas rule the cities, and some of them can shift into these monster creatures because I just thought that would be super duper fun. And where Fated Mates comes in is that obviously you have this chemistry between alphas and omegas, a natural sexual chemistry. And that was really fun to use, particularly with this dystopian structure, because my omegas are all kind of living in fear of being discovered or being owned by an alpha, which again creates a nice enemies to lovers tension. And then my alphas are all, as soon as an omega is discovered, they're trying to claim that one because it increases their power and can enhance their legacy with offspring and that kind of stuff. So that's the way that I use it.
When I was reading it's Beasts of Gatamora, correct? Is how you say that last one? Because we're all reading it. We're like, nobody's reading this to us unless you're listening to the audiobook. In that one, what I thought you did so incredibly was the hierarchy, an understanding of the betas being such a huge class of people that were seen as less than because of their lack of either being alphas or omegas, and them rising up and being like, wait a minute, we're important too. And like having a legit reason of being like, no, this is why I'm talking about Trash City people here. Like that side. I really thought that how you approach that was just so realistic to humanity. And then adding in the Omega element of being like seen as they have to be protected, they have to be put away, they have to not be seen, not be heard, all of that, which I think a lot of women can sympathize and empathize with and be like, yeah, been there, done that. But letting them come into their power and having such incredible power to be like, no, I actually saved the guy one or two times. I just think that how you do that is so empowering for the readers. Was that intentional? And what are maybe some feedback that you've gotten from people around that dynamic?
Yeah, I think that's definitely, it's hard to call it intentional because I think there's a reason that all of my main female characters tend to be women of color and tend to be in these positions of coming into their power with the support of their partner, because I think it's something that we could probably use a lot more of in regular society. And so it makes me feel good. But gosh, hearing you talk about those books just gets me so excited because of where the series is going. But like Merlin, I have to say she's the beta leader of this gang of people called Trash City, and they're all betas and they are working in cahoots with the big bad guy in this thing because they want to be the right hand of the devil so that they can get theirs when they dismantle the regime. But she is actually, I think, my all-time, she's like closely tied with Jack, who's the bad guy from Population, but she might be like my all-time favorite villain character, and I'm just like deeply obsessed with her. Yeah, she's really fun. But yeah, I think more of the feedback I get is less about like how my books feel as like a woman reading them and more how it feels as like a woman of color reading them. I get a lot of feedback about, wow, I like picked up this fantasy book because it had the Black woman on the cover, but like I'm just so not used to reading a Black woman in this role. Like it's just so important to me to just have like representation just in any book, not just like Black suffering books. And it's hard to find, or like books about Blackness in general. Like it doesn't even have to be Black suffering, but it's, oh, here's this amazing fantasy rooted in African mythology. And I think that's really cool. But I want to read not Harry Potter anymore because that woman's lost the card. But I want to read The Hunger Games and just so happen to find the main character in those books be somebody I can relate to. And so that's just more my style. Within that, there are obvious, like very clear, heavy-handed elements of like racism and sexism and just classism and dealing with all of the isms throughout all of my books.
Is that something that just happens, or is it something that you're really intentional about as you're creating these?
Well, I think I tend to write, just the nature of the books that I write tend to be dark. And because I work in fantasy and sci-fi landscapes, like it just lends itself to creating those kinds of class and hierarchical structures. I think like maybe a book like Lord of the Rings didn't really have that kind of a setup. Everyone was just like living in perfect harmony in their little communities. But like, I think maybe that just seems so fantastical to me. It doesn't seem realistic enough. And yeah, so it seems to just be what comes most naturally.
I think like Star Wars, but make it Black and women leading everything.
Yes. Yeah. That's more. Yeah. Or even like Dune, but remove all of the crazy over the top sexist elements. I can't. I have a whole Dune rant. I can't stand it. But yeah, like more like on those vibes than on the Lord of the Rings side of the spectrum.
You have Beasts of Gadamora being and I actually, so funny, and this is probably me being like, wait, where are we? What is happening? I did not realize that it was more of like a dystopian future type of book. And so there were moments where I was reading it and you said like superhero landing, and I was like, wait, how do they know what that is? And then I was like, wait, oh, okay. Or there was like a Jesus reference, like something about something, and I was just like, how do they know what that is? Oh, and then it just tied it, like it made me realize, like, oh, this is the direction that we're going in the story. Cool. Okay, I'm here for it.
Yeah, Beast of Katamora was actually like a return to my messy roots because I wrote the population series first, and that was like when I was still like a hobby author and was just like putting books out, wasn't intending to make any money off of it. That book had to go through 3 different cover revisions because I just couldn't figure out what it was. It's sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's vampires, it's aliens, it's super bloody, really violent, and there's like sex, like lots of spice, like it's just all over the place. And I love that. I love not writing to genre. I think it's so fun to blend. But then I was like, when 2020, I got really into sci-fi romance, and then I was like, let me try to do this properly. And so then I wrote like this Very Mate series, which is just alien romance, sci-fi romance, like very clearly fits into its box. But Beast of Katamora came to me and I was just like, I just wanted it to be what it was without having to try to make it like a real fantasy. And so that's why you like go in, and it's a complaint I've gotten. People are like, this is a fantasy book, but there's like this modern city with like coffee shops in it and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's because that's exactly what I wanted to write. And one of the things that I like writing a lot is, and what I did in this Very Mate series is I cannot understand how authors spend like 30 books on the same planet. I'm like, this is so boring. There's nothing new to be discovered here. And one of the things that I wanted to avoid when I set about writing Beasts of Katamora was I didn't want to get trapped in the same world building with every book. So that's why every book is in a different city, and every city is completely different. Like Dark City is like a modern metropolis. Shadowlands is an ancient medieval civilization. Book 3 is a Viking village. It's just out there. Yeah.
I love it though. I think that it really makes it unique. And you mentioned a little bit ago about how all of your female main characters, or the majority of them, are Black. Obviously, that's important to you because you're a Black woman. And being able to create that representation and create really satisfying relationships where they have partners that are lifting them up, that are supporting them, that believe them to the ends of the earth or will follow them to the ends of the earth, I think is just such a beautiful dynamic to create. You had this element of religion in the Very Mate series, and I'm curious how because this is thousands of years after these humans have crash landed, and so many of their religions have melded together, is what I got as I was reading it. How did you create that, and why did you feel like that was important?
I lived in the Middle East for a while, and so it's always just been a second home to me. And like the use of the Arabic language comes back in book 7 because my main female character, she's an Egyptian interpreter, and I think that it also just seemed like a natural thing that there would still be religion, even in like a super far off future. But I liked the idea that, one, I didn't want to use one particular religion specifically, but I thought that it made sense that like the Abrahamic religions would melt into one. Maybe that's my utopic vision for how religion could look. Yeah. So I thought Sparrow was like an interesting use case for that, and to get to explore. You get to explore that a little bit more also in the little novella that comes, Exiled from Nobu, that comes after book 2. But it was a fun thing to include, though it's obviously outside of my comfort zone. I'm not Mahajiba. I don't wear a headscarf, and I'm not particularly religious myself. So I always tell like authors, when you're doing something you're not familiar with, try to do as little as possible. Maximize where you're going with it, but do as little as possible. And so I don't have a whole lot of characters that are deeply religious and stuff, just because it's so far outside of my wheelhouse. But I thought Sparrow was such an important character. She definitely needed her own book.
Yeah, and I think that how you did it was so beautiful, especially as someone who has a lot of religious trauma, like fundamentalist Christian trauma. it didn't feel like it took me out of the story because it was sprinkled in so beautifully as a way of like devotion and morals rather than a deity, which I think is where personally, where I feel that a lot of organized religions, and notice I said organized religions, tend to veer toward is the idea of like very cult like behavior. We're the only ones that have the truth. We're the only ones that know the way. Everyone else is going somewhere else. But I feel like what you did was just very beautiful from the point of devotion toward something higher than oneself, but also from a morals standpoint of being good, doing good, encouraging others to also live that kind of life. I thought you did it so beautifully. You mentioned the one where you go back to Earth, and why can I not? You have your own like whole shelf over here. So if you're not watching the video, I'll have to post a picture of it. But you have your whole shelf over here. But the one where they go back to Earth, I want more of that. And I believe you have more of that coming. Is that true? Let us know.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I was invited to participate in a crazy cool project next year. I'm really excited to hopefully someday in the near future get to tell you guys what it actually is. But that will involve it's a short story, a shorter story for me, but a return to that planet. And I had written part of the story already, and then I wasn't sure if I was going to use it. I was like, maybe this is not right for this particular project. And then I reread the opening. It's just like, I wrote like the dumbest female character I've ever written, and she's everything. I'm just obsessed with her. Like, she doesn't do anything right. And it's just like such a departure for me because all of my female characters tend to be like very capable and serious and like determined, and she's just like a floundering idiot, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's really a lot of fun.
Oh, I love that you just follow your creativity. You are also a self-published and trad published author.
The trad book doesn't come out until June.
Okay, but very soon this year for sure this episode goes out, you will have had both. How does that kind of differ for you in what you're able to create for the readers? I know I went to Kennedy Ryan's book tour recently. Absolutely lovely and was wonderful. But she was talking about how she had tried to start as traditionally published. And as a Black woman, it was very difficult because they wanted her to write white people. They wanted her to write a certain style of book. And she was like, I don't want to do that. But now that I don't want to say proven because she didn't have anything to prove, but now that she has shown the industry that like, hey, Black romances can make money, they sell, that now she's able to demand what she deserves for these stories. And so as someone who's doing both, how does that kind of feel? What do you think the future is for people who look like you and I to either trad publish or indie publish?
Yeah, I could talk forever about this. I think it's a really cool position to be in, and I'm really grateful to be in it. But I also started originally trying to trad publish like over a decade ago now, way over a decade ago. I was in college when I finished my first book, which I still have. I don't know what I'm doing with it, but rejection after rejection, just tons of rejections, like never really got a definitive answer as to like why my books weren't getting picked up or anything like that. But then eventually decided to do it myself. And then of course, as you prove that you can make money, things happen for you. But I will also say that in this entire experience, and it makes me want to cry, my trad experience, the person and the reason that I actually have a trad contract is a Black woman in the industry. So she actually reached out to me because I would never have gone back into the query trenches. That's just not for me. And indie has been really fun so far. It was to me always like a nice to have to be able to trad publish, but it wasn't something I was actively going to pursue just because of my previous experience. But I was contacted by an editor at the time at HarperCollins, and she was like working with this particular imprint, which was like digital rights only or something. And so it wasn't really my speed, but she kind of sensed like that wasn't really where I was at in my career, and she hooked me up with an agent. And it's because of her that I got my agent, who then got me a deal. And I think that woman was either demoted or fired later. And it pinches, I can just feel it in my heart, just little pieces of my heart shattering off, because I think even like the woman who wrote Yellowface, whose name I'm blanking on, she did a speech that really sat with me. And she talked about how in the 90s or the 2000s or something, there was a small spike in like Black women authors being published. And it all went back directly to one single acquiring editor at a publishing house. And like, this is shocking and like appalling to me that this is actually the case. So it's tough. And like, I have a lot of misgivings about trad for sure. And I have the constant feeling that I'm being underpaid, whether or not it's true. And again, that's not to say that I'm not super happy about my contract. And I am so excited about my book. And I have been really happy with my editors and stuff at Montlake so far. Like, I asked for a Black developmental editor, and they like scrambled and found me what I was looking for. I was like, made sure that the people represented on my cover were actually both Black and not weirdly whitewashed or anything like that. And that was very clearly done. Everything's been taken super seriously, and it's made me feel like very comfortable. But it is still just I think it's a precarious place to be in, when one of my complaints on social media before I took a little social break was just in my orbit, just naturally, I see a lot of white authors being like, oh my gosh, I got my deal. Like, it's 6 figures. Cool. Oh, I got a 7-figure deal. And I'm just like, it's crazy that that's just like randomly happening to the people that I know. And it's only happening to one of the people I know. It's only happening to white women authors. And I'm not seeing any of my author besties of color coming out. I think I've literally seen one, and that was Kimberly Lemming. And I'm like, so happy for her. Like, yeah, like she deserves it. It's like a little frustrating when you feel like there's a big imbalance in what's going on still. That said, despite all of my like general harping about trad, I am really excited about what I was able to deliver. I think I had a lot of apprehension about what they were going to let me include in the book. And like, I'm pleased to announce that I was able to slip in a nice nodding scene in my contemporary romance. Yeah, I went a totally insane direction with it and was like, I wonder if they're going to mind that he like, anyways, I don't want to spoil it. But like halfway through the book, the genre just like dramatically changes. And no, they were like super down with it, and it's a lot of fun. And it's a longer book too, which I always really like. And yeah, and it's been super fun working on this series for sure. I'm working on book 2 right now and absolutely stoked. The other great thing about trad, I will say, is just also like the actual delivery of it. So right now it feels so strange because I don't have anything, like I don't have a pre-order or anything to announce yet, even for me personally, but I actually have 4 books due by May, and I've finished 2 of them so far, 2 for Montlake, and then the other 2 are for like secret projects coming out in 2025 and 2026, but both following a trad model where I just deliver the book and then they do everything else. And so it's just been strange because I'm in a writing frenzy, and it does feel very good at the end of the day to just be able to like shove something off and then just be done and not have to worry about it. Right now, I also have another book that's finished that I was hoping to be able to get out by February, but I really want to simultaneously release audio, and I don't know if I'm going to get there. But yeah, I finished writing the book, and it was just like, after dealing with trad and just being able to send it to somebody, just that, I was like, oh, God, dang it. Like, I have to go through and edit it, like, clean it up myself before I can send it to anybody. And then I have to figure even out what kind of a cover I want. And just, it's been really nice just getting briefs sent to me and me just being able to say what I like and don't like. So definitely trade-offs for sure. But so far, trad's been a nice experience.
Yeah, I think that in the future, and I'm seeing this in podcasting since I work in the industry, that I think in the near future with the algorithm changes that I think we're going to see in the coming years, as well as censorship, that I think a lot of people are going to move towards mediums that they have more control over, because I think a lot of projects will get cut or people will be denied being able to write or speak or post certain things. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the romance industry specifically. But that's why things like this are really important, because then we can get the message out there without anybody editing us down, because it's just us talking. But yeah, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see over the next 10 years or so how these changes are going to impact the future of written word, spoken word, etc. But I think we're going to see more indie authors going that route, which I think will be very interesting. But you have more control over it. But there is more work to be done, because you have to do everything from finding an editor or doing the edits yourself to figuring out the cover or hiring someone to do it. And a lot of it is upfront costs rather than, oh, I made the money with the company or the publisher. So there's a lot of trade-offs there. But yeah, I'm glad that you're seeing something different right now for you, because one, you deserve it. Right? Like 100% you deserve it. And so I'm glad that you're seeing some positive feedback with you having that trad deal, because yes, you deserve it. Your books are incredible. And the world you create are just so incredibly luxurious. Like, I feel like that's like the only way that I can describe the worlds. Sometimes I'll just randomly think about one of the worlds that you created or one of the planets that you created, and I'm just like, man, wonder what they're doing on that pleasure planet.
I sometimes think about that too. I'm like, man, what I wouldn't give to be on that beach right now.
Right.
I also realized that in the conversation about trad, I was really only thinking about like my traditional publisher, but actually like one of the other trad experiences I've had this past year was with audio. And that has been like game changer for me, only because audio is so expensive and the return on your investment as an author is quite poor. So I did an experiment where I was going to try to do all three, but my German translator didn't work out. And so I ended up doing the first three Very Mates books in French and in audio, and I launched them both around the same time. And the plan was then to just pick up whichever one did better and just finish that out and then go back. And my French translations probably cost me around $3,000 a book and earned out maximum in 3 months a book. And my audio cost me around 5,000 or more a book and took 10 months on average to earn out. And it's because Audible takes 60% or 40% or whatever it is. And the alternative is to try to go wide, which is just really complicated. And so when I was picked up for audio, it just felt like such a blessing, because it's not that I feel like I haven't really earned anything yet after my advance, but you're being paid up front for your work, which is a huge coup, and you're actually being able to just provide access. So for me, the access piece is really important, just because I would love to be able to provide my books in all formats, but it's just not possible. So I've been like deeply happy with the audio experience so far.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much goes into audio creation. Even thinking about, I know the numbers are very similar for those who work in voice acting as well as podcast production, which is what I work in. And one thing that my company does that's very different than a lot of other ones, like podcast production, is that they'll just listen, especially if you're sending it over to the Philippines or just like a virtual assistant, they'll listen for those like long pauses or those types of things. They'll clean out some ums using AI features. Whereas my team listens to every word. We're all women in the United States, and we will listen to every word and make sure that you and your guest sound fantastic. Because we've had moments where we're like, nope, that was not what you meant to say at all. Cut, delete, or, oh, wait, that doesn't align with my client's values.
Right.
Like I had a guest say that ADHD happens because of what we eat, how we sleep, etc. And I was like, that's not medical information. And I was like, team, take that out. Yeah. I feel like they would know that, but just in case.
Yeah.
No, we don't agree with that. That's actually not true. We're not going to put that. I'm not going to have that on my platform. but
Yeah.
it takes 4 times the length of the audio to edit it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine because you're like thinking about editing a book with just Microsoft Word, cut, delete, but like audio is a whole different ballgame.
Yes, making sure that it's all leveled to the right way, that it goes back and forth between, especially if you have dual voice actors. Like, there's so much that goes into it that I don't think people even realize. They're just like, oh, pop in the new audiobook, it'll be good. It's, yes, it will be good because a lot of effort went into that. So, yes, please don't get things illegally, first and foremost, but also like kudos to those voice actors and the authors and all the people that put in so much effort to make books accessible to people who maybe cannot read books visibly, right, or physically, who need to be able to listen to audiobooks, or that's how they enjoy processing the information, right? There's so many benefits to it, but it's so much effort and time. But yeah, that's really cool that you had that experience as well, because I'm starting to see a lot more of those just from the people that I interact with, of those trad deals coming up where they already have the book, but then they're selling their audio rights to be able to make the book more accessible.
Yeah.
Which I think is wonderful, especially for people who need that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, any halfway decently successful author will tell you don't sell your audio rights, do it yourself. But for a lot of us, that's just not an option. So I want to have audiobooks, and some of the distributors I work with, Dreamscape and Podium right now, and both have been fantastic.
Yeah, that's really good. You have some fun, is there any fun projects you can tell us about? Your books. So your trad book is coming out in the summertime, right? So what can we expect from that, since that is something you can tell us?
Yes, that is. So I have a 2-book deal with Montlake now. I'm hoping that I will be able to do 3 books in the series, possibly 4, but no more than 4. But it's like a really weird. I wanted to write something in like a contemporary romance style, but actually, I just think that people that write contemporary romance, and a contemporary romance author will be like writing fantasy is so hard, like the world building, trying to get everything right, like new languages, new customs, new cultures. But to me, that's all really easy because it's just stuff in your head. But trying to write contemporary romance where you have to abide by the laws of man and nature is just so hard. Even if you're the worst for me is trying to set something in a real city where you're like, now I have to like Google Maps I don't want like some New Yorker being like, that's not what that part of Central Park looks like. It's really annoying. So I approached contemporary romance from what I would call like an Elizabeth Stevens lens. So it's set in modern times, but we have basically like Superman style, like a bunch of aliens fell out of the sky 20 years ago as children, and they didn't remember where they came from. They look like people, but each of them has a unique and fantastic ability. And I actually wrote this before watching The Boys, but after I told a couple people about it, they were like, oh, you should watch The Boys. And then I watched The Boys and I was like, okay, I guess that's what I wrote. But it's basically the corporatization, the capitalization, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say, of superheroes. And governments got involved, and then they created these organizations to manage them as brands, and there became like a superhero cohort and a villain cohort, and trying to place bids to try to get some of the unaffiliated ones to join either side, and then they perform like heroic deeds around the world and get brand endorsements and shine pretty for pictures. But the first book opens with a PR firm run by like a very shy, kind of neurodivergent woman. And she's tasked with trying to convince this unaffiliated guy who has like fire powers and is like very gruff and doesn't like people to join the heroes team. And it's obviously in my style, kind of like an enemies to lovers. They have like a lot of friction and just don't get along and that kind of thing. But there's obviously, because I couldn't control myself, like a lot of layers into this. And so there's actually like some super villains that you don't meet right on the first page. And then there's some unusual like alien stuff that ends up happening. And so there's a little bit of a monster romance element that comes into play in this. And yeah, I don't know if that was a good description. It probably wasn't, but
literally just contemporary romance with an Elizabeth Stevens spin. I will buy that. So that's okay.
I call it a contemporary superhero workplace romance with a monster twist.
I love it. I love it so much. So if someone has never read your books, shame first. But if they have never read your books, where should they begin between all of your different series that you have available at this time?
I think it depends on how dark you like your books. I'd say like The Very Mates, that series tends to be on the lighter-ish side, which is not saying much because it's also a little bit of a darker sci-fi romance. But you can start with Taken to Veraxia, which is like high sci-fi, takes place on other worlds, alien heroes who look like aliens and human women. Or you can move slightly darker and go to Beasts of Gadamora, which is my chaotic dark fantasy series with an Omegaverse hierarchy. Omegas have magic and berserkers shift into monsters. Or you can go darkest yet, which is based on Earth, dystopian, post-apocalyptic vibes with alien vampire heroes and human heroines. But all of my books have happily ever afters and just follow one couple. So you can start pretty much anywhere and you'll get a full story out of it. Yeah.
Yes. Literally, you could start with any of those. I know I started with Population first and then went into Zaviri and then Beasts of Gadamora. But yeah, I think you could literally start with any of them and you would be thoroughly happy. So definitely go check those out. Elizabeth, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being on. Where can people find you, get to know you, hang out with you, buy your books?
Yeah, my website is booksbyelizabeth.com, but you can also find me on social media at eStevensAuthor, Elizabeth Stevens Author, or on Amazon. And my books are all available in audio everywhere except Population series, which is Audible exclusive. And all of my books were in the KU program, but I've actually just recently moved the Very Mates series wide as a test. So you can currently find the Very Mates books anywhere in ebook, and all of my print books are available everywhere too.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we have links for that in the show notes in the description for anyone who's doing other things while they're listening. And that way they can make sure to grab those links. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to have been invited. Thank you.